Frankly Speaking here at WYDC Big Fox. I'm your host. We have a lot to catch up on. Had a little while, so I wasn't able to yesterday, so I thought no guest today. We're just going to spend time, you and me, together. We start with a story from the Jerusalem Post. Breaking news that Israel is days away from a hostage deal as Hamas pushes for a 5-day truce. Israel and Hamas are close to reaching a deal to exchange Palestinian prisoners for Israeli women and children held hostage by Hamas in Gaza. That's according to the Washington Post columnist David Ignatius. The armed wing of the Palestinian terrorist group Hamas said on Monday it told mediators the group was ready to release up to 70 women and children held in Gaza in return for a 5-day truce with Israel. The truce would include a complete ceasefire and allow aid and humanitarian relief everywhere in the Gaza Strip. So there's been some opinion pieces made in regards to this. So we're going to talk about a really good one from Nikki Haley that we're going to get to when we come back from the break. I just wanted to start with Esther. We also have quite a bit this morning about the presidential race. If you did not see, Senator Tim Scott over the weekend suspended his campaign, so the Republican field is dwindling down to just a handful, so we'll talk about that. We also have a couple things here about former President Trump. Well, we've got a lot of things to talk about. How about that? Let me put my contact information up. Oh, did you happen to see the Veterans Day special that we had here on Big Fox? I thought it turned out really, really nice. Very proud of that show. So if you saw it, I'd love to hear your opinion on it. That's our contact information. You can also reach out about any of the topics of the day and give us your opinion. There's an interesting... Well, you know what? I'm not going to talk about it yet because we're going to take a break. But this piece by Nikki Haley, as well as David Axelrod was kind of the first to do this, biggest name to do this, which is to say maybe Biden should think about not running for president. Now you've had many others jumping on that bandwagon. So we're going to talk about that on the program as well. And then you have people coming out and defending the president, saying, no, of course he should run. So we'll talk about that as well, but I'd love to hear your opinion. Also, first photos of the cocaine found in the White House have been released by the Daily Mail. We may get to that as well. So plenty to discuss on Frankly Speaking. We're just getting started. Let's take our first break, and then we'll be back. Please stay with us. And we are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV Big Fox. I understand the theme music played a little long. Thank you for the heads up. You can always contact me if anything like that happens out of the ordinary. There's our phone number at the bottom of the screen. We already have one virtual wave to kick off the program. Okay, so Nikki Haley has a piece at the New York Post this morning that says the D.C. March for Israel flags key truth. The West now faces a moral test. This is about a 4-page op-ed that Nikki Haley put together for the New York Post. But she said, in a just world, there would be no need for Tuesday's March for Israel in Washington. Yet the past month has made clear many in the Western world are flirting with injustice and worse, outright supporting evil. Yes, we've seen it on college campuses. We've seen it in the media. We need to remind ourselves of what we as a civilization stand for. And just as important, what we stand against. The March for Israel will be in stark contrast with the countless protests that have swept college campuses and major American and European cities. Now, she goes on, and it's a very good piece from Nikki Haley. More people need to come out in support of Israel. But she says, a look at college campuses suggests we are closer to making the wrong choice than at any point in the past century. Yet there's still time to remember who we are and what we stand for. It will be on full display in Tuesday's March for Israel. for the United States, as the leader of the free world, must always stand for civilization over barbarism. And that you can find for yourself at the New York Post. Obviously, we're not going to read the whole thing. Nikki Haley, of course, being praised by the media. Many believe or speculate that she could overtake DeSantis as, well, you can't say the lead in the Republican. Former President Trump still up by something like 30-some points. But coming in second, Nikki Haley, is what some have speculated could happen very soon. Now, back to this issue specifically. Richard Goldberg has a very good point at the New York Post, saying Hamas commits war crimes in hospitals and mosques, but the world says nothing, which is kind of to Nikki Haley's point there. Hamas supporters in New York and London took to the streets this weekend to pressure the American and British governments to cut off support for Israel's war on terrorism. Hamas responded by reminding the world why Israel must succeed in destroying this terrorist organization once and for all. The Israel Defense Forces released footage Monday of Hamas firing rocket-propelled grenades toward Israel, or towards Israeli troops, The catch? The terrorists were firing from the entrance of a hospital in Gaza City, committing a war crime by using civilians as human shields. Now, on Friday, we had the story for you where the Washington Post had a political cartoon that showed Hamas using civilians as human shields, men, women, and children. And what happened? You saw a backlash within the Washington Post and within these various protest groups, and they took it down. Pathetic. But the IDF returned fire and confirmed killing 21 Hamas terrorists using the hospital for cover. When civilians tried to run away, Hamas terrorists ran with them to create physical shields. As the dust settled, some terrorists went back inside the hospital. Now this, again, another lengthy piece from the New York Post, but this is Richard Goldberg. Hearing it from Hamas's chief terror sponsor should remove any doubt that that phrase means and why it's imperative Israel succeed in destroying the Tehran-backed cancer on its border. So we have a couple things, a couple more topics. No, that's not the right word, but pieces on this topic. One specifically from the Post editorial board that we'll get to when we come back from break. But again, you see the number on the bottom of the screen. I would love to hear from you on any of these issues. Of course, we are going to talk about President Biden here in just a little bit. Nate Silver has a piece out today suggesting, like David Axelrod, that perhaps the president should rethink running for re-election. Now, I guess there's no love lost right now between Biden and Axelrod. I can't use some of the choice language, we'll put it that way, that the president has used to describe Axelrod behind the scenes, but he kind of got the ball rolling because he had the most name recognition, got the ball rolling suggesting that the president does not run for re-election. So we'll talk about that as well when we come back. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. There's our beautiful view of Marcus Street. That's where we're broadcasting from live in the Hesselson studio. I'm Frank Acom. This is Frankly Speaking. So the New York Post editorial board calls out President Joe Biden, saying, stop pretending that this hospital peril is all on Israel. Joe, meaning Joe Biden, and call out Hamas's central role in endangering civilians. President Biden on Monday again played into Hamas's propaganda by calling on Israel only to be, quote, less intrusive, as if he couldn't demand that the terrorists stop using innocents as human shields. He said, my hope and expectation is there will be less intrusive action relative to hospitals, and we remain in contact with the Israelis. He later reiterated his call for a pause to deal with the release of prisoners, and hospitals must be protected. His phrasing amounts to a passive-aggressive dig at Israel, suggesting it's being careless around the hospital complex, when it is striving, and the truth is, it is striving to minimize civilian casualties. even as Hamas looks to maximize them, of course. Again, setting up military command centers in and around a hospital is a war crime, as is shooting down civilians trying to flee the war zone. Biden should be calling out Hamas for these atrocities. This coming, if you're just joining us, from the New York Post editorial board. And slamming the terrorists for refusing to accept Israel's offer to get all children out of the hospital and all civilians to safety, and for hoarding for themselves the fuel the hospital needs. Indeed, all the, quote, pro-Palestine marchers ought to be carrying signs condemning Hamas for its intentional waste of ordinary Gazan lives. Israel has zero desire, and this is a point that we've been trying to bring up frequently on the program, has zero desire for civilian suffering. It's Hamas that's abusing innocence as they're its only line of defense and offense. The president's loose talk, driven entirely by his desire to deflect the left-wing anger over his siding with Israel at all, is no way to treat our ally. Yes, he's seeing, and that's why, we brought this up probably a week and a half ago, that when the president looks at his polls, looks at his numbers, will he start to weaken in his support for Israel? Because for whatever reason, the Democrat Party seems to have quite a large swath of people that are not pro-Israel. That's for sure. So will we start to see this weakening? I think we've seen it with his call for a pause. But I'll continue. If he feels he must publicly caution Israel, so be it. But right after saying Israel needs to be careful, we are watching, the world is watching, his next word should be, we're watching Hamas too. It needs to stop forcing civilians to remain in harm's way. Of course, Hamas won't listen. But it's Biden's moral duty to be clear about who's really to blame here. So I thought that was a very good piece at the New York Post. You can find that for yourself. We're also going to get to a few other, I don't know if you want to call breaking news stories but a lot about the presidential race, because you're starting to see more calls for Biden to reconsider running. Now, you've got to remember, we brought this up a lot on the program. The only person that can make that decision is President Biden. So if he wants to run, he can run. I don't know. He seems to have the financial support. He's getting a lot of donations. But is the campaign, and I think we asked this last week, are they looking to run like they did the last go-round, meaning from his basement? Because I don't think that will be successful. And a lot of people are looking at the polls and are concerned that the president stands a real good chance of losing, as of right now, to former President Donald Trump. Now, if you recall last week, I brought you the story where his campaign, meaning Biden's campaign, released really a warning to the media, which is something they like to do, and I think it works for them. There's definitely some ethical questions there, but demanding that they don't cover the polls, that it's too early, that there's not, that it's not the sky is falling kind of coverage. And I argued, and I argued it last week, that the coverage hasn't really been that overwhelming. Not if it were the other way around. If it were then President Trump and the poll numbers look like that, it would be everywhere. But Biden is not, and it's why he gets so angry when he gets even a somewhat tough question, or I wouldn't even say tough, a fair question, but just not something he wants to talk about. He gets so angry because they're so thin-skinned in the White House. They expect and really demand at this point that the media give them this, sweetheart coverage, this kid glove coverage. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Nate Silver has a piece out today about Biden and his campaign. So we're going to talk about that when we come back from break. We're just getting started. Show's going so quickly. Again, you can always reach out at the bottom of your screen. Do you think ultimately President Biden will run for re-election? Now, in full, disclaimer mode here. He has to make this decision very, very soon. Some already arguing that it's too late, and that's one of Nate Silver's points, to decide not to run. But I think I read that the cutoff is normally considered the end of December, the very final cutoff. I personally think he will be running. What that campaign will look like, I don't imagine it'll be too many speeches. I believe it'll be very much like the last time he ran, which was, again, to sound cliche, from his basement, but that's, kind of became the talking point. So we're going to talk about that when we come back as well. I don't want to get on a tangent here because we do have to take a short break. So stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox will be right back. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, thank you for joining us this morning. So Nate Silver says, if Biden can't run a normal campaign, he should step aside. That's the headline to his opinion piece. Now, couldn't you make an argument that he didn't run a normal campaign last time? I think that's a pretty easy argument to make. But this is what Nate Silver says. It's inherently kind of crazy that American presidential campaigns take more than a year to run, but they do. Late entrants don't have a very good track record. Case in point, Michael Bloomberg, remember that, who formally entered the Democratic nomination on November 24th, 2019, and spent more than $1 billion in 4 months. I forgot about that. Think of how unliked Mike Bloomberg is, that he spent $1 billion in 4 months, and as Nate Silver said, he won the American Samoa Caucus, and that was it. So as much as it might make sense for Democrats to replace Joe Biden on their ticket, whose age is a huge concern to voters and who was polling poorly against Trump, it's not like we're playing fantasy politics manager here. Convincing Biden to step aside would not be easy. Running a race against him, if he didn't step down, would be messy, with little guarantee of who would emerge victorious, other than it might be Biden anyway. Worse for battleware. Then there's the whole question of what might happen to Vice President Harris. So my view, again, this is Nate Silver. So my view, as of 6 weeks ago, was it was probably just too late to replace Biden. But as Biden's polling gets worse, his approval ratings are near their lowest ever number. I've been increasingly hedging on that. Democrats would be taking a huge risk by replacing Biden, but they're also taking a huge risk by nominating him. And I think that's a good point. There's no getting out of this. Now, when he goes through and he talked to some people about it, if you're not familiar with Nate Silver, I would say that he's putting this article out because he wants to see Democrats win. So we're not going to go through all the numbers. He analyzes the various numbers. You can find it for yourself at the natesilver.net. I believe I got it from Drudge Report this morning. But on the other side of the coin, because we're always trying to be fair here, Nate Silver saying if Biden can't run a normal campaign, he should step aside. Now, coming from Politico, Jim Messina, who was Obama's 2012 campaign manager, said, no. There's no need to panic over Biden. He said, this all gave me whiplash, meaning the polls that came out. Just like in 2011, we have an early poll screaming doom and gloom for the Democrat incumbent. Yes, we are officially in the Democrat bedwetting era for the 2024 presidential election. I don't want to say it's a new term, but that's a term they keep using, and I find it very much like when nothing burger is overused. It's very odd in politics, the kind of cliches that become so normal. But anyway, here's some advice from someone who's been here before. Don't panic. Here's why. Early polls are unreliable. What's interesting about this, it's almost as if Jim Messina wrote this op-ed based on the letter that the White House sent to the media, saying, "Hey, these polls are year out. Don't even focus on them. They're not newsworthy." But early polls are unreliable, according to Jim Messina. He said, these are just his order. It goes into more depth. I don't want to get too far in the weeds here. But he said, also keep the main thing the main thing. Instead of fretting about early polls, Democrats should follow real data like voter registration, special elections, and turnout, and concentrate on what matters. And he said, focus on the economic message. Now, a lot of people saying that's a bad idea. Polls show that, first of all, the term Bidenomics is not very well liked. It's kind of almost become a derogatory thing. And I think what Jim Messina is saying here, by focusing on the economy, maybe much like when they put out the that ad buy, what was it, like a $25 million ad buy, maybe what he's saying is try to dupe the American voter. I think I heard someone describe it as gaslighting. Oh, no, never mind when you go to the grocery store, never mind when you fill up your tank, never mind your bills as they're coming in. The economy is actually good. That's what they keep telling us. And by definition, that is gaslighting, which is another term that's being used way too often. And many people are using it with no idea of what it actually means. But yeah, so focus on the economic messaging. Back in 2011, we were in the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And unemployment was historically high. But I believe then, and I still believe this, again, Jim Messina, Obama's campaign manager, that the economy is what voters care about most. So we focused our energy on building up Obama's economic message. Specifically, we talked about how the president saved the American auto industry and how it created hundreds of thousands of jobs. That work paid off with approval of Obama's handling of the economy rising from 35% in November of 2011 to 48% right before the election. The Biden campaign has a much better economy than we did in 2011, as individual policies are very popular. There's still plenty of time to break through with voters. The policies they like are actually Bidenomics. Yeah, that's what they're going to continue to tell us. That's why they had that $25 million ad buy, that you actually like Bidenomics. Never mind that feeling in your gut when you have to pay your bills or go to the grocery store. Never mind that. Listen to the ad buy. Listen to the commercial. Another thing, I guess Jim Messina, again, saying don't panic if you're a Biden supporter. Double down on the battleground states. Okay. Biden can win if he holds on to the blue wall states of Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin. He can hold on to his gains from 2020 in the Sun Belt, and he can try to expand the map by winning North Carolina. And Biden has smartly already began that work, with the campaign increasing its $25 million advertising spend in these key states. Yes, that's where he had the ad buy was in swing states, trying to again convince you, if you live in one of these swing states, that the economy is actually really good. Get ready for the GOP opponent that Biden has already defeated once, meaning get ready for Trump. With Trump, you have a candidate charged with 91 felony counts and a different court date every week. Trump means right-wing extremism, everyday chaos, criminal behavior, fundamental freedoms stripped away, wow, and a rejection of democratic norms. Yes. Jim Messina, I don't know if he's working for the Biden administration, Biden campaign wing, because he's saying everything that the White House is trying to say, and we know that that's going to be the main talking point for the next year, that Trump is a threat to democracy. But I'll continue. Don't boo. Vote. That's what Jim Messina says. This will be a very close election, and there'll be plenty more times Democrats will feel nervous. But what will make a difference is the work itself, engaging voters and spreading a positive message about Biden's accomplishments, economic policies, and views on issues like abortion and freedoms. See, there you go. Both issues that we've been talking about that will be the main talking points during this campaign, which is abortion. And when he says here, freedoms, meaning that Trump and Republicans are a threat to democracy. Biden has been counted out time and time again, and he's proved pollsters and pundits wrong. His campaign, along with the rest of us, needs to ignore the noise and build the strong campaign it needs to win, just like in 2020. And Democrats need to remember what I learned back in 2011. Voters decide election, not polls. So that's Jim Messina giving the other side of the coin from what Nate Silver was saying, that if Biden can't run a normal campaign, he should step aside. But again, I've got to say, he didn't run a normal campaign last time. And I think it's only going to get weaker because it seems most times when he gives a speech, there's some type of gaffe. I mean, just what, yesterday he called Harris president again, President Harris. I got to be careful on this. How am I doing on time? Oh, I'm doing good on time. Ryan King, I don't want to even say the word accidentally. It turns out that Joe Biden, because David Axelrod got this talk started, that's why Jim Messina felt the need to come out and defend the president. But yeah, Nate Silver saying he shouldn't run. So I guess Biden has been ripping into ex-Obama guru David Axelrod. And I'm sure, again, that's why Jim Messina released this piece, probably under pressure, because he's a part of that Obama campaign apparatus. But the 80-year-old Biden's hot temper and penchant for profanity are open secrets in Washington, and his disparagement of Axelrod, and I can't say the word that he's been using, as reported on Monday by Politico, is the latest sign of strife between Biden loyalists and veterans of the Barack Obama administration. Yeah, I got to be very, very cautious when I read some of this. Former White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, who has a penchant for trash talking on social media, fired back at Axelrod, saying the man who called Biden Mr. Magoo in August of 2019 is still at it, Klain wrote. On CNN's State of the Union on Sunday, Axelrod insisted that he was not telling Biden to drop out of the race, merely that he ought to think about it. So this is getting very interesting behind the scenes. And again, I just can't use the word that Biden has been using to rip in to David Axelrod. Now the Post, okay, it was the Post, has a piece when we come back. Democrats gaslighting about Joe Biden's job growth won't convince voters. And that's what I highlighted or mentioned in passing just a few moments ago. We'll talk about that when we come back. I don't want to run too late, so stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox, stay with us. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV. Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. We received this comment during break. In the latest election, in my opinion, it proves it doesn't matter how bad things are or get. The sheep will continue to vote the way they vote with no care about what is really going on in society. You can always reach out at that number on the bottom of your screen to weigh in on what we're discussing as well. And I mentioned this. I should have spent a little more time on it. Biden again refers to the vice president as President Harris during the White House's Stanley Cup celebration. He said, quote, President Harris is here to make sure we do this the right way. The gaffe marks the latest instance in which Biden has mistakenly referred to Harris as the president, which has happened on at least 6 prior occasions. Okay, so this is the piece that I mentioned from the New York Post editorial board. The Democrats are gaslighting about Joe Biden's job growth, but it won't convince voters, is their thought. Democrats know voters have soured on President Biden's handling of the economy, what they call Bidenomics. So they've fallen back on his approach, which is lie about it. A Democratic National Committee tweet Monday claimed Biden had created 423,000 jobs every month on average, more than any of his past 6 predecessors. It asserts that President Donald Trump lost an average of 56,000 jobs every month. What they call that is disinformation. Do they really think such gaslighting will convince anyone? This accounting simply dings Trump for jobs lost when the economy shut down during COVID and credits Biden for those recovered in reopening since then, which is about 70% of the president's, quote, job growth, per a House Budget Committee report over the summer. Indeed, under Trump, employment jumped by 6.7 million until COVID. So without going into all of this, because we already talked about this with the ad buys, and they're going to try to convince you one thing, It's never mind what you see, what you experience every day. Believe them and their numbers. But if Democrats want more credit from voters for boosting the economy, tweeting disinformation just won't work. They're going to actually have to boost it. So one more, before we go to break, one more thing on, do we have, yeah. One last thing about President Biden. This was released yesterday, I believe, from the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. There's your first look at the cocaine found in the White House. Obviously, that was a big story not that long ago. And this was released by the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom. Now, you've already had the media come out and try to, I guess, defend the Biden administration. TheExpress.com says White House cocaine could have been planted as the first pictures have been released. And who do they quote? The View co-host, Ana Navarro, who suggested the illegal substance had been planted to bash alleged drug addict Hunter Biden. So somehow, I guess, in her mind or her way of thinking, Republicans snuck into the White House and planted cocaine so that they could attack Hunter Biden. Navarro claimed the incident was being used by the Republican Party to make Biden and his family look worse. Being asked at the time on The View, and again, I don't know how this is a piece because she reacted to this news back in July. But the headline, again, White House cocaine could have been planted as first pictures released. So they're using a quote from Ana Navarro that has no inside information to make this headline. Talk about wanting to defend the White House. Anyway, enough on that. I just wanted to show you that picture before we went to break. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking. Thank you for joining us this morning. Yes, I know it is going very quickly, this program, but we had so much to talk about, and I wanted to take this time out, not have an interview, just so we could spend that time together. Did you know that Mitt Romney will not seek a presidential bid? I did not know his name was being thrown around, and I can't imagine anybody but his own inside circle would think that. But I guess what had happened was because he decided not to run for re-election, not try to become senator again, that people started speculating there was even a draft Romney Manchin committee. Now, there's a lot of thought, myself included, that it was very interesting that Joe Manchin also announced that he would not run for re-election because we know that No Labels has been trying to court him, for lack of a better term, to run for president on this kind of unity ticket. And I didn't think of it, but I could see why they would throw Romney's name around, because another moderate, to put it politely. But according to Senator Romney's chief of staff, he, quote, is not considering running for president on any ticket. That's after an FEC filing was open called the Draft Romney Manchin Committee. Romney's chief of staff says he was not aware of the effort, is not known who was behind it. Interesting. I mean, I would say that Romney's probably full enough of himself that maybe he would think about it if there was this campaign. But anyway, someone very similar to Mitt Romney, Liz Cheney, called out the RNC chairwoman, saying that, I hate when rhetoric like this is used, but it doesn't. I mean, I guess when we talk about Liz Cheney, nothing surprises me anymore. She loves the attention she receives from being the, Trump basher, if you will. She says the RNC chair is collaborating with Trump's, quote, Nazi propaganda. She ripped Republican National Committee chairwoman Ronna McDaniel for dodging questions Sunday about former President Trump's vermin comments, which Cheney described as Nazi propaganda. When GOP chairwoman refuses to condemn the GOP's leading candidate for using the same Nazi propaganda that mobilized 1930s and 40s Germany to evil, it's fair to assume she's collaborating. History will judge, Ronna McDaniel and every Republican who's appeasing this dangerous man. Now, what this is in reference to is over the weekend, former President Trump wrote a post on his Truth social media saying, quote, "In honor of our great veterans on Veterans Day, we pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, lie, steal, and cheat on elections, and will do anything possible, whether legal or illegal, to destroy America and the American dream." So what you have, because he used that term vermin, the media and those on the left and the Liz Cheney's of the world saw an opportunity to suggest that he was parroting, if you will, Nazi propaganda, with Adam Schiff saying similar over the weekend. Now, it's interesting because you've got a party that is not calling out Hamas or is showing support for basically anybody but Israel. And yet they see this as an opportunity to go after the former president. But I'll continue. Adam Schiff said, "So it's fear and cowardice," meaning in reference to this vermin quote. "And it's craven, and it's putting the country at grave risk to even contemplate electing someone who will cling to power the way that Donald Trump tried, who embraces the language of dictators, tries to dehumanize the opposition, calling them vermin, just like Hitler and Mussolini." So that is the talking points. Trump's extreme rhetoric conjures the prospect of a presidency like no other, says Stephen Collinson. Maybe we'll get to that when we come back. But first, we have to take a short break. Man, this program is going quick this morning. Stay with us. This is Frankly Speaking on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I just received this during break. Frank, you really need a slot for a 2-hour show. I know it goes so quickly in the morning, and I do appreciate that. I know I've heard from others, though, that have said they like the hour because we get so much of the most important information right directly in this 1 hour. Here's another comment. I'm reading this on the fly. "As long as the media remains biased, I don't see a solid path to expose any of the political misdirection, except for shows like Frankly Speaking." Thank you, and I would agree. I think that's why we're unique here. "And even then, it requires an awake state of mind to see the fox in the henhouse is barking like a poodle." Thank you for that comment. Keep them coming in. We do have to take another short break in just a moment. But I mentioned this. Stephen Collinson, no fan of Trump, of course, but he has a piece at CNN. "Trump's extreme rhetoric conjures the prospect of a presidency like no other. He calls the former president a strong man who wants vengeance against his political enemies. He'd pose the greatest challenge to the rule of law and the Constitution in modern times. He seeks to crush press freedoms and gut the machinery of government." Wow. Well, it's going to be a busy 4 years, apparently. "It's true that Trump has adopted the rhetorical strategies of some of the most reviled dictators. He dehumanizes his political enemies, has discredited the legal, political, and electoral system, has demonized the press, and has targeted vulnerable members of society, minorities, and immigrants as scapegoats. Like other strongmen, he presents himself as a persecuted savior of a disenfranchised sector of society that sees its traditional values and mores as under attack. Yet comparisons with fascists of the 1940s also risk caricaturing America's current political reality that is not comparable to Europe before World War II." A lot going on there. That's CNN. Stephen Collinson. So according to a new Stack Data Strategy poll, which was actually taken with 15,205 registered voters nationwide. So that's a very big number. The in-depth survey conducted from October 13th to November 3rd and released in Politico on Monday found that Trump would garner 292 electoral votes and win back the White House in a hypothetical general election matchup with Biden, who would secure 246 electoral votes. However, Biden would narrowly win the popular vote, 49% to 48%. Trump's projected victory is based on him winning the 4 states that were decided by the closest margin in 2020: Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And also, in a hypothetical matchup, well, first, Trump beats Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Gavin Newsom, just so you're aware, in this poll. And in a hypothetical race between Biden and DeSantis, Biden obliterates the Florida governor in a landslide. Biden carries 359 electoral votes to DeSantis' 179 in this scenario. All right, let's take our last break. We'll be right back with Frankly Speaking here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. We are back with Frankly Speaking here on Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom, and we are broadcasting live from the Hesselson studio here on Marcus Street in Corning. With 9 weeks to go until the first votes, can you believe that? In 9 weeks, we will start to have votes in the primary. Trump remains commanding frontrunner as the GOP field keeps shrinking. If you weren't made aware, Tim Scott suspended his campaign on, I believe it was on Sunday. It's a slimmer field, but it's the same story. This coming from Fox News, as former President Donald Trump remains the commanding frontrunner for the Republican nomination with 9 weeks to go until the first votes are cast. Senator Tim Scott's suspension of his White House campaign on Sunday came 2 weeks after Mike Pence departed as well. And 4 lesser-known candidates who failed to make the debate stage have also dropped out, as the Republican field that once included over a dozen contenders keeps shrinking. And I know a lot of people that don't like Trump had said from the beginning, Chris Christie, people like that, get out. Because if you narrow it down to 1, maybe 2 people, like a Nikki Haley and a DeSantis, maybe they start to gain some traction against Trump. But of course, with the ego of someone like Chris Christie, that did not happen. Nothing's changed. Trump's still ahead. And right now, he's on the trajectory to win, said longtime Republican consultant Dave Carney. Yes, if you look at the poll numbers, it's interesting because they try to make it a horse race. If you read the articles about Nikki Haley, could she overtake DeSantis? But still, you're talking a distant second. Vivek Ramaswamy, over the weekend, as we go through a couple things here very, very quickly, vows to fire federal workers. Did you see this? And he's going to fire federal workers just based on a Social Security number. Nothing's going to break, he said. Ramaswamy unveiled his plan to drastically cut the size of the federal government over the weekend, announcing he would fire workers based on their Social Security number. In a post to Twitter, X, it's called X now, Ramaswamy said that if he were elected the next commander-in-chief of the United States, he would, quote, instantly fire 50% of federal bureaucrats. Here's how. If your Social Security number ends in an odd number, you're fired. That downsizes government by half. Absolutely nothing will break as a result. Interesting. All right. Well, what do you think of that? We are out of time for today's edition of Frankly Speaking. That went very quickly, but I want to thank you, everybody who joined us, all the virtual waves and all the comments during the breaks. I appreciate you watching the program, as always. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I appreciate you taking time out of your morning to join us here. We do have a busy week, so I hope that you tune in every weekday morning starting at 7 for Frankly Speaking, right here on WYDC TV, Big Fox. I'm your host, Frank Acom. Have a great day, everyone, and we will see you tomorrow morning, bright and early.